The Pieces Lie Where They Fell by Evil Humor. Edited and co-authored by Anon E. Mouse Jr. Read for you by My Name is R. Chapter 33. Rex and Windbreaker. Part 1. Rex. Rex was doing his best not to pace in the cabin they had been directed into after Vix Lee wandered off with Knight. Vittel had already claimed her bunk, which was built into the side that was close to the floor, with the Zodilus making a barrier of blankets and pillows, and muttering how much this was bad. Paige had taken the top bunk, and was doing her best to stay out of sight, no doubt to ease both her and the Order's distrust of each other. Windbreaker was on a bunk on the other side, with his own mini nest built up, but he did have his crossbow within reach and fully loaded. "Do you think we should do something, Vittel?" Paige asked with a nervous chirp, back in her unicorn form. "They have been gone for a while." "I don't know," Vittel muttered with a groan as the ship rocked a bit. Vixley and Knight are our heavy hitters, and even with Knight, she whined, dipping into her bed frame before groaning under her breath. "Even with Knight being injured like that, I doubt he'd be unable to fight." "He doesn't have his sword anymore," Windbreaker muttered as he wiggled his way out and leapt down from the bunk with his natural cat-like grace. "Say, Paige," he tilted his head up to look at her as he took a bottle out from his pack and began to uncork it. "Isn't there a pony disease that comes up when you cannot do something related to your special talent?" "Well, yes, there is a risk for special talent failure, but it's not a disease per se," Paige replied. "It's more of an emotional breakdown." She shook her head. "Besides, I strongly doubt that just swordplay is Knight's special talent. I have known him for a long time, and I am fairly certain it is fighting in general that's his special talent. He's very good with his sword, though it's far from the only combat method he knows. There is a reason he fights unicorns in sword tournaments and wins." "You're not kidding us, are you?" Windbreaker said, only to swear when Paige made it clear she was not lying. "Still, he's in no shape to fight." "Not physically," Vittel snarked, before a lurch in the ship punished her. Rex turned his head to see Windbreaker flinch, and no doubt feel a stab of guilt. "Well, we can figure some. Vix Lee, you can put me down. I can walk myself," Knight's voice carried from outside. "I did it before." "Yeah, and they got annoyed at us, Knighty. And we're almost here, so tough it out a bit more, okay?" Vixley said. "Now it's time to—" "Oh, please don't say it," Knight whined. "It's time to carry you over the threshold, Knighty," Vixley cooed, as she opened the door with her hoof, and walked into the room carrying Knight bridal style, with said pony grumbling and pouting the entire time. Windbreaker was bowled over in laughter, while Paige snickered from her bunk, and even Rex couldn't stop himself from some laughter. Vittel was smirking from her own bunk, only to let out a surprised grunt when Vix Lee looked up at her. "What?" "Knight needs a best to rest in." "Knight needs a bed to rest in, and so you mind getting up and out?" "No, my bed," Vittel said, with a bit of a playful pout. "Okay, hold this bat pony," she said, as she placed Knight on Windbreaker's back, causing the Griffin to squawk out in surprise, and the Nox pony to squeak as well. Rex then noticed Windbreaker was quite able to support Knight, with both of them clearly surprised at their close proximity with each other. "Okay, scat, move on." Vixley began to try to shoo Vittel out of the bed, with the Zodilus hissing and grumbling. She actually began to swipe at Vix Lee, who tried to get in close to the bed, even arcing her back and switching her tail. Vixley seemed to be getting into it, with her snorting and grunting like a bull. It came to a head when Vixley pulled out her toy hammer, spun it in the air, and then lashed out faster than Rex could react. The Minotaur booped Fiddle's nose with her hammer, saying, "Boop." There was a short period of silence in the room, before they were all shaking with laughter. "Vixley, please don't make me laugh like that again," Knight whined through his snickers. "I don't think my sides could take it." "Yeah, they'd probably open up again if you laughed any more," Vixley said as she picked Knight up and walked over to the empty bed that Vittel had left. "And you'd have to go back to the dock with, bridle? Is that what it's called?" "Whoa, back up there a second," Paige said as she flew down and looked at the Nox pony, who was settling into the nest that Vittel made. "Open up again? You mean to tell us you were bleeding the entire time and you didn't say anything about it?" "To be fair and honest here, I completely missed it until they told me," Nightblade said to them, with Vixley nodding her head to back up his claims. "And they made sure I wasn't going to bleed again by putting in new stitches." "Okay, now explain why you had a bridle in your mouth," Windbreaker chuckled as Nightblade began to blush and turn away. "It wasn't that kind of bridle, Wind," the Nox pony said, pawing the bed. "The examination was a bit painful, but they forced that thing in my mouth so that I wouldn't scream or bite my tongue off. It tasted awful, and I need something to wash out the taste, so gimme." Knight tried to reach for the bottle that Windbreaker was holding out, but Rex decided to step in before Knight made it worse for himself. "How about something that will not spread the taste around? Windbreaker, do you have anything cream-like?" Rex said. Rex asked the Griffin, who began to root around his pack. They truly needed to work on getting Windbreaker on a proper plan to wean him of his addiction. "Got some advocat?" the Griffin finally said as he pulled a bottle out. "Not one of my favorites for straight-up drinking, but someone gave me a bottle a while back and recommended putting it on waffles or using it in some kinds of desserts. It's thick enough that it should do the trick." Pouring a small shot glass, he handed it to Knight, who began to drink it. "Better?" "Yeah," Knight said, while making a face from the drink, shaking his head and sticking his tongue out. "That was terrible tasting however you say it." "Well, I haven't had time to have the cooling spells that keep my drinks replaced, so I guess my advocat will be a bit..." "Ooh..." Windbreaker trailed off, eyes going wide as he suddenly felt around his pack with fierceness. "No, no, no! They're all getting warm!" he said with a loud groan, even starting to panic before he looked at Paige. "Can you renew the spells?" "Yes and no," Paige said, placing a hoof on his shoulder. "While I could try and renew the spell, I think it would be better if I did not, to help you get over your addiction." "Oh yeah, now it's time for that," Windbreaker huffed as he tossed his pack to the side of the room. "Right when we are dealing with the most insane group of ponies ever." "Hey, Wind, you're not the only one in this group, and unlike you, I really get sick on airships," Vittel snapped, as she was now on the lower bunk bed in the middle of the room. "So suck it up. You knew that this was going to come sooner or later." "Yeah, but I thought it was going to be my choice," Windbreaker huffed as he reached for the bottle he already had out and took a drink from it. "I hate warm beer." Vittel let out a snort before groaning and holding her stomach. "Look, Wind, you..." Whatever she was about to say was cut off when the door slammed open, and an order member began to do some of their hoof language. Rex was doing his best to look away, to avoid observing their language and by extension learning how they communicated in public. He did not trust himself to keep the knowledge secret, and was rather averse to dealing with their wrath. They made a series of gestures at Vidal, who was holding her head up with all three of her hands, before letting out an annoyed groan. "You have to be kidding me." "What did they say, Vidal?" Rex asked her, as he sat down on the bunk under windbreakers. "That this isn't a charity, and they expect us to do some chores," Vidal groaned as she got to her feet, before swaying and holding her stomach. "Okay, what do you want me to do?" Knight said, before the Order member shook their head and made a sharp downward gesture with their hoof that was clear in the message. "Yeah, they don't want you moving around, Knight," Vidal said, before blinking at the Order member, and sighing and shaking her head. "I am not saying that, you—" "Let me guess," Paige said, as she stepped towards the Order member, the latter squatting down and tilting their head at her as if they were planning on charging her. "You don't want me doing anything, as you believe I am completely untrustworthy to do any work, and I might sabotage it." To their credit, the Order member nodded their head before making more hoof gestures, which made Vidal frown angrily. "They also want to lock you in a small room. They don't want to do it here, as Knight might reopen his wounds, and they'd need to spend valuable time unlocking the door to help him." Paige rolled her eyes before sighing. "Regardless of what I want or say, you are going to lock me up, aren't you?" The Order member nodded their head again, and was about to sign something else, but Paige continued, "And since your order knew what this was," she lifted her green gem element, "you will not do anything to me." The Order member froze, before moving their head in an odd fashion, almost akin to a pony swearing, but they were completely silent. The cloaked being then turned on the spot before storming out of the room and slamming the door shut behind them. "Was that the best of ideas, Paige?" Rex asked, as he fidgeted with his violet gem element. "Should we really be antagonizing them?" "Of course not, Rex," Paige said with a confident smile. "But I am not going to be bullied like that." "I just hope that this doesn't come back to bite us," Windbreaker grumbled as he went back to his bunk, nursing his bottle angrily. "Remember, they were willing to cripple us beforehand, and I doubt that they'll just forget about that." "I actually doubt that, Wind," Knight said, as he reached into the pack he had been given and pulled out the book he had been given previously. They considered themselves to be the followers of Her Grace Celestia, and while she wasn't the Magi of Stars teacher, she and the other elements did report to her. The Order knows something of the elements, and how important they must have been to not kill Paige. Whatever they actually do, these elements, the Order isn't going to take the chance if anything happens to us before we do what we are supposed to do. And once we do, I highly doubt the elements would fade away, Rex conjectured. So this all might be them being extremely prejudiced with no actual tangible threat behind them. "So do we agree to help them or not?" Windbreaker asked, with a hint of a slur in his voice. "I don't think we should be pressing our luck, guys," Vixley said as she hopped onto the bunk atop Vidal's, causing the Aizodalus to mewl in surprise as the bed frame sunk down close to her, and a further, louder one, as she nearly kissed Vixley's dangling hooves when she tried to roll out of the bed. "Oops, sorry about that, kitty cat." "Would it be wrong of me to assume that you are in favor of this to work on this ship?" Rex inquired, with a grin on his face. "Not going to lie, I so want to hijack this ship and see what she can really do," Vixley said, with her usual smile, chuckling a bit as she kicked her hooves out. "They're barely making these engines purr." "It can go faster?" Vidal whined as she stuck her head under the pillows. "I hate airships." "And you'll be good never to say that again in front of me," or I will do my best to make you love airships, Viddle, Vixley replied, the feline whimpering in fear as a response. Before anything else was said, there was a loud knock on the door, followed by an order member walking in, making signs at Viddle. 1 second, let me see what you are saying, Viddle said as she pulled herself upright. Okay, do it again? The order member seemed to glare at her, before repeating their signs, with Viddle watching intently. Good news, Paige, you're working in the kitchen, Viddle said with a roll of her eyes. I'm working on cleanup. Apparently they figure if I'm going to throw up, I may as well clean it up. She flicked her eyes towards Windbreaker and Rex. Wind, you're taking lookout positions due to your eyesight, and Rex, you're on logbook duty. Sounds fine. Hey! The order member stormed towards Windbreaker, grabbed the bottle, opened the window, and tipped it upside down, before handing the empty bottle back to the Griffin. Yeah, they've got a no drinking before a shift rule, Wind, Viddle said as she got to her feet. Vixley, due to your knowledge, they want you wherever they need you, and Knight, they're going to move you up to the top so you're not stuck here the entire time. They'll move you and us back down once we get near the borders. The Nox pony merely grunted in acceptance, while Vixley had a very excited expression on her face, and looked like she was barely holding back a squeal of delight. So, Viddle concluded, we have our assignments. Vixley, they want you and Rex on the bridge first. Windbreaker, you're up top. Vixley gave her an enthusiastic salute. Aye aye, kitty cat. Come on, Rex, we've got ourselves an assignment. Rex nodded and quickly walked along behind her. You really do know your way around a ship like this, don't you? He asked, as they traversed the halls of the airship. Yeah, Vixley commented, as she put both her arms behind her head. This one reminds me of my dad's greatest creation, actually, the Destiny Explorer. She was his pride and joy. Made several trips all the way around the South Pole and back, believe it or not. Really? Rex gave her an interested look. That is impressive. I'll say. I got to know every inch of her when we were building her. This one's practically her twin. She beamed as she traced her fingers along the ceiling. Of course, given this order's love for secrecy, I doubt they gave her a name. Still, they seem to be treating her well. Point in their favor, at least by my reckoning. Still, this could be quite a treat for you, I wager, Rex said. You could continue your family's tradition by working here. Well, Rexy, if I were gonna do that, I'd be back home with my family working to create one of these beautiful queens, Vixley said with a small, happy but sad smile. Oh, sigh. Instead, I was the less focused one. Too much on the jokes and that kind of stuff. She trailed off before leaning against one of the arches and letting out a tired-sounding sigh, rubbing her eyes. By the gods, I left home without so much as a note. I can't help but think how much they were freaking out about that, only to find out that now I'm a wanted criminal, and that picture is not going to make things better. I don't believe we have heard you talk much about your home life, Rex said, as he looked at her with concern. We do know that Knight, Windbreaker, and myself did not have the most ideal youths, but it was pretty good, Vixley said, as she shrugged her shoulder, seemingly past her moment of sadness. She took a few steps forward before halting. Huh, that's odd. Paige and Viddle both had pretty good childhoods, right? She waited for him to nod before speaking again. 3 of us did have a good childhood, and 3 of us didn't. And 3 of us can fly, and 3 of us can't. 3 of us walk on all 4s, and 3 of us walk on just 2 legs. Hey, 3 of us are guys, and 3 of us are chicks. Rex blinked at this revelation, marveling at how much they did have in common, which was split directly in half, and what it meant for them all. Well, there are a few things that are not balanced. Knight is the only noble of us, unless you count as one. Nah, Vixley scoffed, shaking her head. No noble titles for my family. We're just civilians who are the best shipwrights in the Minos Islands. Aha. Rex contemplated for a moment. There is also the matter of our species. From what we know, the original bearers were all ponies, and we have seen 2 Pegasi, 2 Earth ponies, and 1 unicorn. And the Magi of Stars was supposed to be the most powerful unicorn who ever lived. Yet, only 2 of our group are ponies, and Nightblade and Page Turner are of different tribes, and the rest of us are a different species entirely. Hey, it was just a thought, Vixley told him. But you have to admit, it is a pretty big coincidence, and coincidences are one of the 2 things my dad and I have never believed in. Oh, and what's the other? Kalinkanzaros, these little goblin thingies that are supposed to lurk underground. And no, they're not based off your species. Rex blinked. I see. Well, I'll do my part to see if I spontaneously become an equine, he chirped, with Vixley laughing at his little joke, climbing the steps out of the hold and onto the deck towards the bridge. To see what they wanted of him and Vixley, with the Minotaur almost skipping ahead, the delight obvious in her mannerisms. He found himself smiling at the sight, but it calmed slightly when he began to wonder how long they'd be on the airship. Good things come to those who wait, he reminded himself as he followed her, and Vittle's element is certainly one of those things. Part 2. Windbreaker. It had been several days since they had been brought on this ship, and he hadn't been allowed a single drop of alcohol. If this was what sobriety was, it was highly overrated. He was twitchy, he had headaches all the time, and he found himself barely holding back from snapping at all the others and these annoying order jerks. How was he supposed to tell what they wanted when they refused to talk to him and got angry when he tried to learn what they were saying? At least the rest of the group was doing okay. The order ponies had not been too keen on eating what Paige had made at first, but they were eventually won over when they saw that none of them suddenly died after eating it themselves later on. Apparently, their dinner time was one of the few times that they went around without their masks, and none of them were allowed to see what the order members looked or sounded like. Rex had taken to his new job almost as happily as Vixley. She was having a blast, doing everything and anything the order told her to. She even got them to laugh, in a way. Turned out their masks blocked all sounds they made, and it had been really freaky to see them throw their heads back in silent laughter. On the other hoof, Vittle didn't seem too happy with her duties, nor was the order. She'd predicted correctly that she'd be sick more than once. She had predicted correctly that she'd be sick, and more than once she had run to the side of the airship to barf her guts out. She didn't always make it to the side of the boat, and she spent so much time complaining as she cleaned that up. Nightblade, however, had been surprisingly even-tempered. The Bat Pony had spent most of his time merely craning his head around, trying to get a good look at areas they were flying over, while he was resting on the upper decks and recovering from his injuries. He hadn't sniped at Windbreaker once during the journey, much to the Griffin's astonishment. Then again, with everything he's been through, who can blame him? Windbreaker thought to himself. It might just be his upbringing that's kept him really all quiet and still. If he was willing to gamble, not that those order people would let him bet, Knight was doing his best not to go crazy. He had noticed Knight's hooves flick around a couple times, and he had tried to move during the first few days before the order forced him back into his chair, gave him a glass of water, and left. After that, Knight hadn't tried to move once. Windbreaker let out a sigh as he remembered the times at the hatchery when the sisters didn't have time for all of them and ignored about half of them, and yet still expected well-behaved griffins. Some played with each other, but Windbreaker hadn't had much luck with how Diamondback teased him and how weird it was. Now that he thought of it... Still, he and Knight didn't really get together, and both knew that any attempt to talk would just be weird. "I have to ask," Nightblade said as he suddenly walked past him. "Just out of curiosity, what did you say that stuff you gave was called again?" "Advocat," Windbreaker said as he began to stand by the pony. The name means lawyer, I believe it or not. At least, that's what the guy told me. I guess it was their preferred drink where the stuff was made. It's got brandy and some other stuff in it." "Ah," the fat pony nodded his head. "Despite all the work I did with my tutors, I never got a hoof on languages. I only learned what I needed to get my drinks or get other jobs." Windbreaker sat beside Knight. "I'm only semi-fluent in a few languages, and what I do know beyond what booze to order is how to swear." "That is always good, I suppose," Knight said dryly, before letting out a sigh. "I'm not sure if you have seen the papers recently." "Nah, I haven't touched 'em since I don't need to find a job," Windbreaker said with a roll of his eyes, before looking at Knight. "Why? What's wrong?" Knight let out a sigh, before reaching under the chair and pulling out a couple of newspapers. He shifted through them, using his right hoof, as it was almost done healing up, and gave Windbreaker one of them. Windbreaker blinked at it, seeing it was only 3 days old, and looking at the headline. He swore as he saw a photograph of where they'd fought Sharp Point, the ground still dug up, with the headline saying, "The Traitorous Six Strike Again." He began to read it, and his face paled as he read the article of how Sharp Point, still alive somehow, despite being knocked clear across the field by the order pony that saved Knight, and his fellow mercenaries had tried to apprehend them before the order showed up. His face paled further as he read about everything they did to fight back, even listing the fact that he had ripped an eye out and ate it before puking it up. He winced at the title they gave Knight, the Butcher of the Everfree Forest. "Yeah, it's pretty bad," Knight said, rubbing his ear. "They pieced together what we did to survive, and he told them Paige is a changeling. No matter what happens afterwards, her life is ruined." Knight snorted, before looking up at him, still wearing the eye patch. He hadn't taken it off to see his eye yet. "You too. They're calling you a throwback from the ancient times, after what you did to that one mare. Though, from what Rex told me about why you did it, I can certainly understand your reasons, considering all I did," Knight said with a louder snort, running his tongue over his fangs. "I don't think we're ever going to get back to our old lives. I have a massive kill count now, a whatchamacallit name, and I've been scarred up." Knight turned his head to look at him again. "You know, I'm kind of jealous of you, Wind." "What, really?" Windbreaker snorted at this. "What's so great about my life that you are jealous of it?" "You live it," Knight said as he pushed himself upright. "Look, the bulk of my life was simply to exist. There was so little expected of me to do beyond not embarrassing the family name that I just moved through the days when I wasn't doing contests, tournaments, or being with Paige. I didn't even know what life was like, and, despite how insane things have become, this has been the highlight of my life. This stupid adventure, and meeting you guys," Knight said with a smile on his face, tapping his necklace. Windbreaker let out a groan, rolling his eyes as he rubbed the back of his neck. And now here comes the awkward part where I say I'm kind of jealous of you. I mean, I get you have issues with your parents, but at least you know who they are. And you had a home with your own room. I mean, I lived with about a dozen or so other griffins growing up, and from the ground running, I had to be working to pay back the hatchery. Don't tell anyone this, but I always dreamed of my parents coming for me and being actual royalty, and they were going to take me home. I read in a book once that we always wish for what we do not have, only to discover that the grass has always been green from where you stood, Knight said, before turning to face him. Wind, for everything that's happened between us. Yeah, I know, Windbreaker said, cutting him to spare the guy's pride. Likewise. Holding out his hoof, Knight looked at him to see if he would return the gesture. Windbreaker smiled as he bumped hooves with the other stallion, smiling back at him. We good now? He asked Knight, feeling a weight off his back. Yeah, we're good. Until one of us. Yeah, we're good. Until one of us does something stupid, Knight snorted as he shook his head. And if it's you, I'll be sure to smack you out of it, you noble idiot, Windbreaker said, wrapping a wing around his non-injured side. And I'll be positive to do the same if the situation is reversed, peasant, Knight said, in an over-the-top, noble, posh accent, with an arm wrapped around his neck in a loose chokehold. Windbreaker could tell Knight was barely holding his laughter back, and it suddenly became a game to see who could hold it the longest. You know, Wind, beside Paige, you guys are the first people I can call. Oh, not again! Viddle's whining voice from behind caused them to pull back in surprise as she stormed over to them, looking a tad less green than usual. Look, you two, I had hoped you would be able to put away your differences. Viddle, Knight began to speak, moving to stand with a bit of a stumble, and Windbreaker helped him by flexing his wing out so Knight had a soft support wall. No, let me finish, she snapped, walking over to jab a finger into both of their chests. I had hoped you two would stop your fighting, put away your differences, and... We already did, Windbreaker said, with the Owie barely paying any attention, and apologize to each other. Wait, what? We did that too, Knight chimed in, flashing her his wide smile that showed his fangs off. When did this happen? She asked, tilting her head in surprise. Just a few seconds ago, Windbreaker said, doing his best not to laugh at the faces she was making. And you just cut into our guy bonding time, Knight said cheekily, flashing him a quick look that just screamed play along. Knight just promised to give me pointers in how to use my crossbow, Windbreaker said before tilting his head to the side. You still up for it? Not like I have anything else to do, Wind, Knight said, as the two of them walked off to a small area that had been sanctioned off as a training hall. Oh sure, make me the bad guy here, you jerks! Even though she was shouting at them, Windbreaker could hear the amusement in her voice. You are a self-proclaimed con artist, so you did that yourself, Knight shouted back, with Windbreaker letting out guffaws of laughter as he saw Viddle actually blush at this. Some hours later, the six were gathered in their cabin once more. The room had changed since they'd first begun on the voyage. Now there was a large mirror in a gilded frame hanging on one wall, allowing them plenty of room to see it without crowding one another. According to their leader, Viddle explained, they can't let us be seen by the local authorities, but apparently they decided we should be able to see out when we arrive. So they set this up to give us a good view. Paige examined the mirror closely for a moment. Very impressive work, she murmured as she drew back. I've seen scrying mirrors like this before, and the enchantment is incredibly difficult. I have heard the same, Rex commented. There have been efforts to create smaller and more portable versions, but it's a long and complicated process. The closest they've come are the shortwave communications spells used in the helmets of the guard branches, But those are audio only, no visuals. Such things would surely come in handy, Knight put in. But look, he pointed, prompting the entire group to stare at the scrying mirror and at the sweeping vista it now displayed before them. What they saw was a massive city of crystal buildings, including an enormous palace at the very center. Well, Vidal finally said in awe, here it is, the crystal dominance. Alright, for this chapter, I'd like to point out something I didn't notice the first time I read it, but now I'm questioning it. I'm a little surprised the Order left witnesses. They seem like the sort who would go for the whole leave no survivors to tell the tale of what we just did here, when they swooped in and saved the traitorous Six. I'm a little surprised any witnesses escaped to tell about it. Again, that feels like they would have a reason to cover that up. If nobody lives who saw you save the traitors, nobody can know you're in league with them. But if you leave a witness or two alive, people are going to talk. Did they decide they didn't bother, or did they fail to catch everyone, I wonder? Also, I noticed the specific note of the Magi of Stars was not a student of Celestia's, which is precisely wrong. I find it amusing he specified that. And nope. She's not that, but they're close. No, she was that. Let's see. Nice to see Wind and Night have finally got over their issues. They're doing alright. And I think that was the biggest interpersonal issue of the group. With that solved, hopefully they can be a proper team now. Still a little friction between various members, obviously. That's true of any group of people. But they should be a more united group now. That's lovely. They're going to need that. They're going to need all the help they can get in what's coming. Though apparently, there are 2 groups we've seen so far, and 3 if we count that priest dude, who might just help them, or at least stay out of the way and not hurt them. Yeah. The Order, the priest dude, and the changelings all seem to have at least some appreciation for this group, for various reasons. Well, if they can get all 6 elements, that's going to be a huge part of what they need to do. Not all of it, because the elements of harmony will not necessarily help them deal with the random guards who have merely been tricked. I've never gotten the impression the elements of harmony can be just used at will. They can only be used against, certain targets. And random people who are just trying to do the right thing and confused are not their targets. Well, I wish our protagonists the best of luck. Hopefully without killing any more guards. Killing those random thugs from Sharp Point, no problem. It is unfortunate for them that they've had to kill innocents. That's a bigger issue. I see why they did it, and they're definitely trying to do the right thing. They're not bad for doing that, but it is an unfortunate situation when one is forced to kill innocents. That's always a sign of things being very bad. Yes. Well, I think that's all for this chapter. I hope you had a pleasant time listening. Thanks for watching. I don't normally say this, but it's always true. Feel free to like it, like a little thumb button if you like it. Subscribe if you want to see more. A lot of people say that with every chapter, or every video they make on YouTube. I'm not going to. I might say it more than just this one time, but it's not going to be something I do every video. Personally, I feel it gets annoying and repetitive. You know. No, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, thank you. Have a pleasant time. Goodbye, everybody!